Welcome to AMEJA's first ever awards ceremony. We're going to get started quickly with the panel tonight. My name is Huda Osman. I'm the president of AMEJA. We're going to start with the panel, and it will be followed by the announcement of the winners and the award ceremony and then a reception. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Tonight is a momentous night for us at AMEJA, and we're very happy to share this with you. And I'm going to let Professor Mohamad Bazzi do the introductions, but first, thank you so much to the NYU Kevorkian Center for hosting us tonight and for Professor Bazzi for everything that he's done to support us throughout this process. Thank you.
We're going to do our conversation first, and then we'll go to the award presentation, which I know many of you are waiting for. The mic. I'll try to do this as a relatively organic conversation, and then we'll have a lot of time for you all to ask questions. Oh, sorry, I can't quite. The mic is sort of under the. Okay.
Oh, you know
that's
better.
Yes. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, is that better? Great. Okay, I'll start again. We're going to do this relatively organically, I hope. We'll ask you to keep your questions relatively brief when we get to the Q&A part. And I promise I'll leave a lot of time for questions. Engage the three of our panelists in the conversation. I'm not going to waste time on introductions. You know who everyone is. And then we'll move to the award portion by about 7 or so. So, thank you all for joining us. I want to ask you each to give us a sense of your path in journalism and the ways it's interacted with the Middle East. And I think you all have interesting experiences, and I think you all have insights on sort of the larger question of how being connected to the region, either through language, family background, place of birth, sense of identity, or all of those ways, has impacted your coverage of the Middle East, and also just your approach to journalism. I realize this is a very broad question, and for now, I'm going to ask you to keep it concise. So, sort of a daily news story, not a feature, but we'll start with that, and then we'll see where it takes us. Ayman.
First of all, it's great to be with all of you here, and it's great to see such an amazing turnout for what is going to be, I'm sure, a beautiful conversation, a beautiful evening. My journey in journalism is very much defined a little bit by my identity and my background. My personal story is that I was born in Egypt. I came to the U.S. at a young age. Was going to school at Washington, D.C. at American University. I was interning at NBC News, where I am now. Basically, as a desk assistant, so very entry-level job, but in the heart of the newsroom. And 9/11 happened, and unfortunately, there were not a lot of Arabic speakers in the newsroom, and it started my career that I was taken off of this desk assistant program and put into the investigative unit to help with translating and researching a lot of the stuff that was coming out of the reporting regarding the attacks. And to kind of condense the next several years, the following year, I was thinking about going to law school because in typical Arab immigrant fashion, you either become a lawyer or a doctor. And my parents were asking me if I was going to go to law school, and I had to make a choice of whether to defer law school or possibly continue in this journalism path. And that was the year that George Bush spoke at the UN and talked about Iraq being part of the axis of evil with North Korea. And all the indications were that the U.S. was going to invade Iraq, and so all of the American networks were beginning to basically beef up their presence in the region. So I left the internship program. I deferred going to law school, and my mother still asks me if I'm going to go to law school after all these years. But I deferred, and I ended up going to work for CNN, and that began my journey in covering the Middle East for the next 15 years as a correspondent before becoming an anchor.
Thank you so much for hosting us.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that for me, I am right now a metro reporter, and I started my career at local newspapers in Brooklyn, neighborhood newspapers, at the time in Sheepshead Bay. And for me, September 11th was also a really formative event. I grew up in basically like an enclave of Syrian and Lebanese Christians who came here, a century ago. And I think 9/11 made me think about Arab identity a lot more than I might have otherwise. I was in college at the time and just starting to get interested in journalism. And so when I started started reporting, I immediately was drawn to trying to report on immigrant communities here in the city, Arab and other communities. And so that was how I started. Local news. I worked at the Daily News and the AP in New York City, and then I went back to the Times years later. And now I've been there for almost 10 years on staff. And I have also had a lot of different jobs there, but I've come back to a similar views I had 20 years ago.
My path was a little bit different. I grew up just outside of San Francisco, and my dad was from Iran, and my mom was from a very evangelical Christian suburb of Chicago. And that's the kind of worldview I grew up with in Orange County, California, which is nothing like Iran or suburban Alabama. And the backdrop for a lot of my childhood was the revolution in Iran. Lots of relatives of my dad immigrated to California. We grew up with a lot of people that had just arrived from Iran and looked and acted nothing like the crazy people that I saw on TV every time Iran was being displayed. So I had this kind of question growing up about what's this place really all about? I never had the opportunity to travel there. And it was my junior year of college, right in this neighborhood, actually. I went to community school. Didn't get into NYU. And I was studying creative writing. And I realized that writing and journalism is the path that I wanted to pursue. And I didn't want to pursue that of working in a local newspaper. I wanted to go to the other side of the world and impact this place that had been kind of vexing me my whole growing up. And at that time, that was not a prescription for being a journalist. I think it was more so to learn. But I took my chances and started traveling to Iran as soon as I took the first trip I made was just a few months before September 11th, actually, in early 2001. And I started going back a couple of times a year and sending freelance submissions to publications all over the U.S. You'd be surprised what your success rate is on email if you put greetings from Tehran. I still put it there somewhere. I really need somebody to write that. So yeah, that's how it all started. And in 2009, I just decided to go all in and move forward. And it was great until then.
Thank you for all of those great insights. Since this is AMEJA and this is a regional study center focused on the Middle East, I want to grapple with something a little more difficult, which is the idea that we're seeing, the debates that we're seeing today of it's not just in journalism, we're seeing it in art and literature and sort of everywhere of authenticity and who can tell, who has the right to tell stories, and who has the right of both storytelling, representation, and being of a community or a subgroup. I guess in the case of the Middle East, it's many different groups and identities, but and getting lumped together. So, in your own work, what has it meant? Has it opened doors? Has it closed doors? Probably a combination of both of those things in different instances. Having a sense of that, having part of that identity and covering a vast region of film, such as part of your identity, or probably large parts of your identity for all three of you, and then against this backdrop of this larger debate that I think you also all have thoughts on as journalists, because you also, in all of your journalism, you covered other things. So, I want to hear your thoughts on that.
Who wants to? Ayman, since we're going.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So I'll try to kind of be as concise as possible. One, I think everyone has the right to tell the stories. I don't think there's no exclusion zone about who can and cannot report or cover anything on the Middle East. I think the real important question is that reporter investing the time, learning, committed to it? And I've come across amazing journalists in the Middle East who are not from the region or have no connection to the region, but have spent the time and studied and know and really connect and not just fly over or parachute in and parachute out. So that's my general view on that. In terms of the identity and how it covers it, I think the last couple of years in America have been transformative, and I think it has also opened an opportunity for journalists, certainly with my background in covering the Middle East, although I do it now a little bit removed than what I used to when I was a correspondent, now because I'm more in New York and have broader conversations. But there was a time when your identity was kind of, especially when you're talking about sensitive issues, was seen as whether it is a filter or a block in you being able to report on a story accurately. And I think why I related to what has happened in America in the last couple of years is because with various movements of social justice, equality, immigration debate, I think what we've realized is your identity is an asset to being able to understand the nuances and sensitivities of these stories. And organizations have really embraced that and have really pushed to have more diversity in the newsroom. So I think, I know some of the initiatives that we've taken on at our network have been to try to incorporate more Black journalists in our newsroom, and certainly have more women journalists in our newsroom. I think it's important for us that we also have very strong organizations that represent all kinds of journalists, from LGBTQ, Asian Americans, or AAPI. And I think we have realized that when you have journalists that have diverse backgrounds, you get better stories and you get more nuanced stories. I'm not sure that was the case when I was starting out about 20 years ago. So I at different stages in my career, I knew that there were moments where my language skills, my affinity to the region, my ability to connect with the region, because I spent a lot of time there growing up as a child and family, could have also been perceived as like, you're too close to the story and we're not going to let you report on it, or we wouldn't want you to report on it. But I think that has changed now, and there's an evolution that is happening that is important, that we should all embrace. The resistance is not there, and if it is, it's probably a little bit more subtle. But I think that on the surface level, you're not going to hear someone say, which is something that was said to me early on in my career, you're too close to the story. I don't think that we would be comfortable with hearing someone say to a Black journalist, you're too close to social justice or Black Lives Matter, you can't report on it, or a gay journalist saying you can't report on marriage equality or LGBTQ, or somebody who had an experience as a dreamer, perhaps, saying, hey, you can't cover immigration. Those things would be taboo now, and rightfully so. But as a younger journalist, there were moments when people I was working with much more senior than me would say, you're a little too close to the story, you're not able to see it fairly or accurately.
Yeah, I think we're talking about two extremes, like on this question, right? Like the side of if you're not from this group, you have the right to tell the story, versus actually being part of the group, a liability because you can't be objective about this. And I think in mainstream media, I don't think anyone, you know, I think prevailing view is that like, you know, everybody has a right to tell stories regardless of their background. And I mean, I totally agree that I think that, you know, membership in like a marginalized community is now seen as less of a liability than it was 20 years ago in terms of objectivity, which is, you know, great. You know, I think it's also a little bit complicated for us as a cohort because we're not really accounted for necessarily in like corporate diversity plans because we lack a media box. In many organizations, like on the census and stuff like that, I'm working on a project about this right now. So I think it's like on a little bit of like an in-between space, right? Like,
and maybe also you brought up objectivity. Maybe also we're seeing, let's say, the rethinking or redefining. I mean, it goes through. This goes through different stages. Certainly in American journalism, in the 19th century, there was a very different definition of objectivity or what it meant. I guess we've had a contemporary definition maybe since the 60s and 70s of almost the sort of voice of God, almost the sort of voice from nowhere, and that many are starting to push back against, including my colleague in NYU Journalism Professor. But I think that's part of also maybe what you're pushing on, what you're saying, this rethinking of what objectivity could mean or the ways that it plays out, as opposed to everything's going to have an equal number of quotes from the two sides of the cycle.
right, that we try to be a little smarter, right, in how we make those decisions and what creates and what we get different, you know. Not just people
One thing I would add is I think there's also more space now for specialization. Right? And I think that wasn't so much the case when I started 20 years ago. And you know, what do people specialize in? They specialize in the things that they care about. If you care about something and you're objective about it, I don't know. Right? So I think some of these conversations are just naturally transferring. And what we do is kind of fluid. I always give the example of the year that I was hired at the Post 10 years ago was the year that we came up with their social media policy, which was we were not to use social media during the work day. Right? That's not our policy anymore. You know, things change, and you know, I think our concepts of objectivity and specialization.
Okay, I'm gonna stay with this theme for a little bit longer and ask each of you an individual question that touches on this, but broadly. I think these might be a little easier. So I'll start with Ayman. So in August of 2020, you tweeted this after your first show. When I was a young boy growing up in the Middle East, I used to make home videos pretending I was a newscaster. Today, I hosted my first show as an anchor of a news program on an American news channel. To all the kids out there, don't give up, dreams do come true. An inspiring tweet on a platform that's not very inspiring. So that was 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago. And I'm wondering how your thinking might have changed or evolved since then. I'm assuming you deal with a lot of online abuse and hatred. You get your fair share of hate mail, email, and it strikes me beating up, right? Because you're sort of at this intersection of both getting toxic hatred around the Middle East and the rest of us, we don't deal enough with this. You get toxic hatred around covering U.S. politics now, especially since over the last 4 years. So I don't know, would you tweet that again, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I would tweet it out. Yeah, I mean, at the time that I tweeted it, it was just a personal milestone that I kind of reflected on. So I kind of figured, why not share it? And if I would have digitized the home videos, I would have probably put one of the home video clips of me and Jordan running around as a little boy doing a fake newscast in the snow and put mean, why not? I think, you know, people use social media in different ways. You know, I use Twitter and Facebook and Instagram very differently, and it's true. Twitter is a little bit more toxic, unfortunately. So I don't tend to post a lot of my personal stuff on Twitter. I do way more personal stuff on Instagram just because the community interacts with pictures differently. And I think it's telling that when you actually see a person, like when I post a picture of my family or my kids, people are not as mean, right? Like they can actually see you and they're like, oh man, this guy's actually, you know, he's a human being. He may not agree with me like on certain politics, but you have to cross a very different threshold when you're going after somebody after you've seen a personal side to them. And Twitter, because of the fact we may be losing our blue check mark, so it would be more hate. So we don't pay the $8. We're all going to be subject to more criticism. But any sense of like that you would have a personal element of Twitter, I think, is a lot less. And I think that's one of the fundamental problems with the platform. In terms of like the hate mail and the stuff that we receive, there's different types of it. I mean, there's just the outright hate mail that's like, you piece of whatever, and like yelling at you, cursing you, calling you all kinds of names, which I've gotten all throughout my career at different stages. And then there's like the more kind of like argumentative, people want to debate with you and try to push for you to make statements or, you know, why don't you say X, Y, and Z, and I usually take those over to my executive producer to deal with, and he's actually here tonight, so he gets a lot of those emails that we both get from our standards department saying, like, hey guys, could you possibly respond to this email from this group that wants to understand why you explained it or said the things that you said? So, yeah, so I just kind of, you know, you have to respond to those, obviously, sometimes, because it's important, but I also think, you know, it's a spectrum of viewer emails and tweets and messages that we deal with on a rolling basis.
I guess on the last part, sort of the accumulation, or I'm guessing you're both Middle East criticism and Trump. The accumulation for you, particularly,
Yeah.
of U.S. political and Middle East.
For sure. Listen, I mean, I think it comes with the territory. It does not bother me personally. I do not personalize any of it. And the truth is, when you are talking about, I mean, listen, I am sure in this room alone, we will have a lot of different opinions on everything from Iran to religious politics, to the Middle East, to, you know, American politics, to Marjorie Taylor Greene, whatever you name it, there's going to be a difference of opinion. We are at a stage where everybody is so heightened because of social media. Everyone has the ability to express their opinion, and that's great. I still think as a society, as an industry, we're learning how to filter through the noise and which ones we want to listen to, which ones we don't, and which ones can carry some weight, which ones don't. But for me, yeah, I mean, there's a similarity across the board with hate. You know, the people that hate your coverage in the Middle East and the people who criticize you for your coverage in America tend to have some similarities sometimes. We don't have to go into those tonight.
Okay, I'll ask.
You touched on this a little bit in your concise intro, Aaron. Your coverage of MENA communities and heritage communities at the times, both in the New York area and then in the U.S. overall. I think we've kind of carved that out maybe as an unofficial subbeat. And then you're working on your survey project about the MENA census box for lack of one. And I guess it raises especially broader complications of covering a little bit about the complications, extra scrutiny, extra hatred, extra layers of covering the region itself, but of covering MENA communities, heritage communities in the U.S. that goes a really close to other, probably opens up criticism from readers, scrutiny from editors, but also from the communities themselves that would want to scrutinize your own you and where you emerge, and you have an Arabic sounding name, and it's not going to fit into an exact category. So how do you handle that?
Yeah, well, so just for some background, I am working on a survey about Middle East North African American identity with two colleagues in the graphics department, who they actually started the project, and I came on a little bit later. But it turns out that it actually started because they were looking at ideas about like how to cover, demographics in the U.S. And they had also done a big project a couple of years ago where they looked at the diversity of elected officials in the U.S. and came across a big problem when they had to figure out what box to put certain politicians in who were of backgrounds. And so, my understanding is that reach out to various people and say like, hey, where should we be putting you? Which for them made it clear that there was a hole in the data basically. But it is very complicated because this is a very diverse community, religiously, ethnicity, nationality, language, etc. And so it is hard to make generalizations, I would say. And it does also complicate efforts to show to higher ups in the newsroom that this is something worth investing in, covered in this community, I would say.
If I remember some of the background, it's I forget the name of the group at the Times, and others are, is the Arab group, what is it called?
I was the co-chair of the NYT Arab Collective,
Okay.
but we've rebranded, and we're now the NYT MENA Collective, in an effort to be, more inclusive and include many more of our colleagues.
And they're involved in the survey.
They are not technically involved in the survey, but if anybody would like to talk more about it, I'd be happy to discuss this as well.
Thank you. Jason, and here I know I'm risking a runaway, losing total control of this evening by bringing up your own coverage. But we have, we'll keep the crowd under control on that. And I think one of my questions is pretty basic for now, which is, I'd like to hear what you make of the Western coverage of your own protests. And partly, well, I'm going to give you an end to narrate a bit, because you wrote a very moving personal column after the fire in prison, and I think you made a couple of interesting, you touched on coverage, you touched on how this is playing out, and obviously you have a very deep personal experience with the story. So I'm just curious, and I know I'm expecting you to know your colleagues involved in some of these coverage and this sensitivity. Because you're all evening. We have the room, we have the space until 8:30. With regard to your comment,
Actually, I'm going to start by taking a slightly maybe contrarian approach to this. I and other colleagues, so we have an internal Washington Post Slack channel for Iranian journalists with about 9 members. So we're actually pretty well represented. And we had a debate recently about why we weren't doing that. I was just kind of, I have a comment, so I can say whatever I want to comment, so I don't say anything. It's like, just kind of watch. And to me, the main question has been why is the Western media covering Ukraine so closely and not us? First of all, there are dozens of American correspondents, film crews, photojournalists who are working in Ukraine with permission from the Ukrainian government. There aren't any in Iran right now, and there haven't been in years. Since I was arrested in July of 2014, Washington Post hasn't had a correspondent in Iran for a single day. New York Times hasn't had anybody there for a couple of years. I don't want to get into the details about the things that some of my colleagues when I was in Iran faced, because it's not my business to talk about it. But you can read all about it. I dealt with it there, and people dealt with it to varying degrees. So there really isn't Western journalists inside Iran. And the Western news organizations that are there are staffed by local people who sitting in the front here, we've talked about this over the last few weeks as well. A lot of people have been calling us, calling journalists out on social media. Why aren't you doing more? I'm an actress. Why am I, giving the news that we want? Well, we have standards and practices of course in the Times and MSNBC. We can't just publish whatever we feel like publishing. So that's one part of it. But I do think that we're slow to the party. I think we're 7 weeks into this. It's clearly different than anything we've experienced before in the last 4 years. And what I'm seeing now is that we here in the West are just kind of catching up fully with the conversation, and it might be too late. I'm not sure if we really have a handle on what's going on the ground, and this is a space that's ripe with disinformation. Disinformation coming from the Iranian regime, coming from the Saudi government, Emiratis, Israel, other actors in the diaspora. So it's a mess to make sense of, and I'm glad that I get to write about it from my own opinion rather than as someone who's reporting on it from the phone.
Thank you. The rest of you want to weigh in on the one? I'm sure it's going to come up from the audience. I have a lot more questions, but I do want to open it up fairly soon. I will ask you a question sort of close to the heart of the journalism students and the area studies students who are in the audience, which is sustaining foreign reporting. I'm sure it's close to the heart of any news members too. Of sustaining foreign reporting through these times. Jason just touched on it in the context of Iran, where there's a particular context of the regime not allowing. It's less a question of resources, but it is a question of resources in so many other contexts. And I guess it's also in so many places now that I'm thinking in my mind of places and hypocrisies around the world where there's significant interest, but it is becoming harder beyond the resource question. So it's really a combination of the two, of resources and a country kind of looking inward, and the politics in the US and some insights on this, sort of sucking the oxygen from the room so much, and people wanting to engage in introvert stories more. But is there a path that you see through some ways to preserve foreign reporting, and I mean I may also be really wrong, and the new models are becoming sustainable now, but kind of we can talk about the problematic freelance model that puts so much pressure on different ministries themselves and media executives, news organizations for responsibility. But yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I'm sure many in the audience do too.
So I would say a few things. One, MSNBC is not an international news channel. And I say that with the caveat, and I hope I'm not disappointing my bosses, but it's not an international news channel in the context of you are covering the world for the world the way that Al Jazeera English is, or BBC World is, or CNN International is. You are covering America, and when things happen overseas, you are covering it, but your mindset is about explaining the world or trying to cover the world for an American audience. And that might sometimes be lost on people who say, why aren't you doing more so and so about this and that? And I'm like, we are not an international news organization. But having said that, I think as a network, we are in tremendously strong positions around the world. I mean, we still have a bureau in Cairo, we have a bureau in Jerusalem, we have a bureau in China, we have our major international hub in London, we have a correspondent in Iran, we have a presence in a lot of other places in the world through a network of freelancers that we rely on regularly. And in addition to that, we are part of a global news organization that includes Sky News. So we have all of the resources of Sky News at our disposal. We have used them on my show when we needed to report on places where we can't get someone to, where we don't have someone there immediately, whether it's in Ethiopia or in India or South Africa. So I think it's the totality, but the more important part is I think sometimes we tend to be very focused just on a linear product of how does coverage look like on TV, and that has changed a lot as well. And one of the things that I am very proud of at NBC is when we look at our digital platforms that incorporate our website and what we're doing in terms of stuff on it, some of our best reporting is not just the 14 hours of live television that you see, which are geared towards conversations around American politics and may not necessarily be focused on Iran at any given or any other foreign major story at any given point. But if you look at the totality of the coverage that is coming out of NBC, that includes MSNBC, NBCnews.com, MSNBC.com, all the stuff that we're doing online, the streaming services, we have really good coverage on a lot of the big foreign policy issues and things that would never break into the surface of cable news as a conversation. We just did a report the other day on NBCnews.com about how this year tragically is going to be the deadliest year for Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. And it was put on our website, and I think we have amazing reporting that happens a lot that I think sometimes people don't pay enough attention to, while they're also simultaneously criticizing just what they're seeing on 12 hours on broadcast. And it's not to say that it's not valid criticism, but I just encourage people to take a step back and look at the totality of the coverage and see all of us consume news in different ways. And it would be wrong to undermine one and say, if it's not on that, then it doesn't count, or if it's only on this, then it doesn't count and it doesn't get enough coverage. All of that said, we should still do more foreign news coverage.
Yeah, it's something that I think is really important. I think we try and make news from around the world accessible to American audience. I mean, that's what I was trying to do in literally every story I ever wrote for Iran. And I think that's the challenge, right? If you were to ask the editor of the Post or the Times or producers of MSNBC, CNN, why don't you do more foreign news? If people click on it and people watch it, we'll do a lot more, right? And so I took it as my challenge to figure out how to bring people that are sitting a world away into this place. And it's not always easy to do, but I think that's part of the art of what we do, trying to figure out how to make people care about places and people that are far away, but maybe not that different from them. And I don't have a recipe for that, especially now that I'm not able to go and cover the place, but I did try to do that. When I go and write about other places, that's always the perspective I'm looking at. What can I do to make this a little bit more enticing for an American reader to want to read?
Yeah, I guess I'll just add that can be a really heartbreaking process to go find a really compelling story, and then realize that you can do the best job in the world, but relatively few people are going to read that story. I worked on the international desk at the time from like 2014 to 2016. As Anne Bernard can attest, we worked on last year coverage together, and I think not just in Syria, but Afghanistan, there's a lot of big stories like we see. Sadly, we got like on the traffic side.
It's better not to look at traffic.
So I don't have the answer, but
Someone in the audience. Okay.
I'm going to open it up. That's the audience. Great. I'm just going to make
Working. I just wanted to return back to the question of communities covering communities they belong to, the regions they belong to the question of Palestine. You all mentioned that it's sort of acceptable for people to cover their own communities, but I wonder specifically with the question of Palestine, if it's something of a red line. There are many of these journalists who have honestly said that the coverage of Palestine has been very difficult for them, and there's been a very heavy hand in the editing from particular news organizations. I know it's I've almost dropped it on here, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Everyone hear the question?
I can take it first just for a few reasons. I lived in Gaza for 2 years. I covered it. I lived in Jerusalem. I've been covering Israel-Palestine since one of my first early assignments in 2005. I think that story singularly stands out from everything else in the region. It's safe to say that it has taken on a lot more scrutiny in American media than any other story in the Middle East. So there's no reason to kind of pretend it's not. That's one. There's definitely a double standard with how journalists are viewed in the eyes of Western news organizations. And it's taking time, but also I think journalists are learning the difference in terms of what is expected of them when they are covering that particular story. And that also is something that is evolving. So I think we're all very familiar with the nuances of the comparisons when they say like, oh, there's a reporter who has a relative that serves in the Israeli military, and then there's a Palestinian who makes a comment in support of the Palestinians, and that journalist is fired, but those are all double standards to the certain extent that they are articulated clearly why. I don't think companies have very good policies about it. But I think companies are learning that this is a blind spot for them, and they have to learn how to do it better. And a lot of that is because they're getting called out. I mean, I think nowadays, and this is why it's important to have organizations like this, is when there is such a glaring blind spot, when there is such bad coverage as a result of a policy that nobody's able to call out, organizations respond to it. I mean, I have been a product of that myself at a company where when there was public outrage for a blind spot that the company had, they course corrected. So I am not a person who thinks that companies or news organizations just like stick to a position they're not going to change. They evolve, and they may not be evolving as fast as you and I and others in this room would like them to, but that only comes with the participation of these communities and others. Certainly on this particular story, because it is such a, again, it's such a heavily scrutinized story, and you know, emotions run high on both sides. It's not to equate both sides, but just they run high on it, so there's both sides do weigh in on the coverage, and both sides think the coverage is not in their favor and is not accurate. So I feel like organizations have to get better, but it's still a long way to go where the journalists that are freelancers or from those communities, certainly in the occupied Palestinian territories, are viewed with the same respect and afforded the same journalistic respect that other journalists who may be coming in from abroad or from the Israeli side are oftentimes afforded.
Great job.
We can go back with other questions too.
So I'm curious, just relating to this topic, what makes MSNBC an environment that permits you or Ali or Mendy to be sort of more vocal in, let's say, expressing Palestinian views or maybe being a little bit more critical of Israel? Is it a policy by MSNBC to be more inclusive, or I'm just curious what do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't think it's an issue of a policy. I think it's a commitment to being able to hear as many sides as possible. And I go back to the issue of there's a responsibility on the journalism as well, not just on the organizations, which is the journalist who's presenting an opinion. And again, I speak here from both as a correspondent who covered this story for years and now as somebody in the perspective space where I can give my opinion on the situation. Those are very two different things, and we should make a note. And Ali and Mehdi as well, and Joy Reid and others, and Chris Hayes, we're all in the perspective side of the news programming, of the programming world. So we can give more of our opinion on these things and analyze them and give our context to it. When I was a reporter, it's obviously a slightly different standard. There is more of the, well, what are both sides saying? You have to try to kind of finesse that. It's not a policy as much as it is a commitment. And there's also the responsibility of the journalist to say, if I'm going to present a viewpoint that I know is going to be potentially controversial or even perhaps going to draw a lot of attention or criticism, what is the basis, the factual basis that is lending me to make that viewpoint? And so when you get top-notch journalists who are not as beholden to fear or just the concern about, I don't want to deal with it. And I apologize to Kyle, my EP, because they do have to deal with a lot of these emails that when I know I'm going to say something, I know there's going to be several emails that come in, and it's going to be an hour of my time and an hour of his time to take and send and respond. But when we do that, we know that we have crossed our T's, dotted our I's, and made sure that we are making a point that we believe in. And we think it's an important point that is not necessarily getting a lot of coverage. So it's not, I don't think it's a policy. Nobody says like, hey, we're going to take this policy. It's just, there's a commitment to, if you're going to do this type of journalism and allow this space for conversation, just make sure you are prepared to back it up, explain why you were taking that viewpoint. And I think that's been the guiding principle for a lot of the viewpoints, certainly for me, and that's how I operate in that space.
I want to share a very quick anecdote a long time ago. And I think it just points to the importance of, there are actual people making these editorial decisions in all of these institutions. And people who haven't worked, a bunch of us who work in editorial institutions here, don't always realize that. There isn't kind of a top-down policy. It often depends on people who make those decisions and where they are and how those people view the world. And my quick anecdote is sort of the first time I was sent by an American news organization. I was a reporter, I was a fairly young reporter back then for Newsday in the summer of 2000, at the beginning of the second intifada, to fill in for the correspondent who was based there, several hours, not the Palestine, who had to finish a book about the war in Kosovo. I had to leave for 2 months, and I went to fill in for him. For Newsday, a paper based on Long Island, where there were people in the audience of Newsday who had very strong feelings about Israel, and who would call up the foreign desk. The foreign editors didn't tell me this until I came back, but they would call up the foreign desk fairly regularly or email and say, wait a minute, I'm looking at the paper today, and there's a guy named Mohammed who's writing from Jerusalem in the West Bank. Like, how could you send him? And there were two incredibly supportive editors. One of them was the late, great Les Payne, who was the top foreign editor. He decided he was going to send Mohammed to cover the story and do more of it in the future. And Tim Phelps, who had been a foreign editor for a long time and had covered the story himself, also himself rather, let's say, he covered it not to the liking of a lot of people who were reading Newsday then. But it's really important in that, and there were other editors within that organization who didn't agree with those editors. They luckily did not have the power. And it's so no one, there's no grand policy. It's the people who make these news organizations function and the values they decide to impose.
And they subsequently put the Bureau in Beirut.
Yes,
For a while, that
they
was also very...
moved the Bureau. That was a whole other. But they did that for me actually. So yes, that was also controversial. They moved that. Okay, more questions? Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Speak up and we can speak loud.
Yeah.
Hi, so my question is for John. It's regarding Iran coverage. You mentioned that you have to design your content for an American audience. Do you find that there's kind
that working?
Yes. No.
Yeah, I feel completely free to express whatever I want. I think tailoring it for an Iranian-American audience would be too narrow. And believe me, every article I read about Iran, I've been doing this for a long time, right? Like, that article about protest was okay, but why didn't you write about our 2,500 years of history? Why didn't you write about that? Why didn't you know what I'm saying? So,
Why are you calling it a protest and not a revolution?
Yeah, exactly. So, you have to have a little bit of a thick skin and know that I know that this is not going to be the last Iran story that I write. And I think about it as kind of like I guess I'll take the bait, as sort of like a Persian rug, right? That was dad's business. That was my family business. But each one of these things is a piece in a much larger puzzle that I look back on and say, okay, I've done a pretty good job of representing the experience of Iranians as I understand it. But I don't know if there are other good platforms where I can reach directly to Iranian Americans. Yesterday I did an Instagram live with an Iranian American journalist, and we spoke for about 45 minutes. I don't know how many people watched that. She asked me to do it with her. I thought it was a great conversation. I got good feedback on it from a handful of people, but I imagine that the average Washington Post audience wouldn't have been that interested in
An email about it from one of our students. It's cool. One who were independent white. Yes.
So the three of you come from very established networks and platforms, but in the Arab world, as you know, it's filled with kind of fake news and disinformation on social media. So for us, the young journalists that are working at platforms, at Arab newspapers, how do you counter this kind of disinformation, fake news coming from just regular websites or social media platforms that have no recognition, but have a huge following, a huge following?
It's something. It's something that we deal with all the time, and again, I don't have a lot of great answers for it. And I think a lot of people, a lot of organizations have said, "Hey, we're not going to engage with that. We're going to ignore it." You can't ignore it, right? Because we're watching what's going on in Iran right now. Those narratives become gospel to large swaths of populations. If you're an Iranian American organization or journalist or activist, and you're not engaging with the Persian language sphere, you're in trouble because a whole lot of stuff is going on over there that is spiraling out of control. And that, again, I don't think the response is to not respond. At the same time, the whole point of that disinformation is to draw you into it and get you to respond. So, I don't know. I need an army of people to help me figure it out.
Yeah, I think I'll just add that I think even if you are, early in your career and working at a place where there aren't always the greatest editorial standards, you can strive to, follow those best practices in your own work and still get a lot of good experience, even from a place that's imperfect.
Can I actually see everyone who's thinking of a question? I need a quick calculation. That's it. Oh, okay. That's it. Okay. And I think another man. Yes. Please. Thank you. Okay.
Anyway, long story short, it was accepted for the show at Sundance. And then with a lot of opposition
introduce the mic because this is a detailed issue that I think everyone should hear. It's a complicated question.
Yes, yeah. So the movie was accepted. It was seen as a good movie, whatever. Without having seen it, of course, nobody could talk about it. But it was shut down due to a pushback from American intellectuals saying it's inappropriate. So it goes back to the question of authenticity. So it succeeded in bringing it down. So what do we do with that? I mean, are we respond to it, or do we not respond to it, or what happens now? It's a radicalization right now. So.
Yeah, I think the campaign was largely
filmmakers, I mean others as well.
So I will say in full disclosure, several months ago I was approached by a group of Arab journalists who wanted to express concern about this, and they sent me the screener of the movie, and they said they were writing a letter because they were very disappointed with the way the movie is. And I actually watched the movie, and I thought it was excellent. And I said, I'm not going to sign the letter. And I was actually very much against Sundance. First of all, I have two schools of thought. One, I fundamentally am against censorship. So and that's for me an example of censorship, which is you can be offended. It's okay to be an Arab and be offended and think that journalistically this is not a good movie. That is okay. But it's not a good thing when you are just sending to Sundance, which is a pretty decent film festival, we can all agree on that, for platforming this movie. Now, that's not to say the movie doesn't have criticism. I would have much rather these journalists and others criticize and engage with the critique of the movie than just simply try to put pressure to not have it aired. So, and I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with it, but essentially, and I'll give it to you in a nutshell, it's just a movie that chronicles 4 individuals that are going through a Saudi rehabilitation program. And I think anyone who watches this movie and thinks that the Saudi rehabilitation program, after watching this movie, is actually a good program, totally misses the point. So that's exactly why I think you have to watch it with an open mind, because all 4 of the individuals chronicled, I don't want to give away the movie, and I apologize to the filmmakers, but all 4 individuals that are chronicled do not come out of there rehabilitated. They all come out of there with all kinds of other problems. Drug problems, one goes back to the war in Yemen. So there's nuanced stuff to be critical. People didn't like the name Jihadi Rehab. Yeah, that's a silly name, I agree. That could have been changed. Like, I'm sure it's like some producer who sat in a focus group was like, hey guys, I think this is cool, like, you know, super size me, you know, it resonates. It's like Jihadi Rehab, so they're like, let's go with it. But so I think, like, I just think it's like it detracted from the underlying message. And I think if you watch the movie and say, well, how did this, you know, white American journalist get access to a Saudi rehab? The Saudi government must have wanted her there. I'm like, valid question. Watch the movie. No way the Saudis would have wanted her to make that movie, because she talks about like how MBS comes in and like fundamentally shuts down the program and like creates all kinds of problems for this rehab program. So all the arguments that I was hearing about what this movie in theory was so bad about, I think if you watched it and had an open mind, you would realize that it actually undercuts some of these arguments. So I did not sign the letter when they asked me to sign it, and I also have come out and supported the movie, not just saying like it's an amazing movie, but saying like it's actually worth having a conversation around it. It should have been shown, and it could have been a great conversation starter that I think we're missing out on. That's just my personal opinion, by the way. I think it is a lost opportunity.
I didn't see it. I didn't follow it.
I think it was from a few people actually seen it. It has a screen.
Well, like I said, I was approached by, you know, I had not heard about it. I was approached by some colleagues and journalists, people I respect, people I admire, who said to me, like, hey, you have to watch this, you can't let this happen. And I watched it, and I just was not there. So, and fundamentally, I would not have done it either way. Just even if I did not like the movie, I am not a fan of silencing or shutting or canceling. Just because it's happened so much on the other side of things that I cared about, that I'm like, I would not want to see a film festival like Sundance say like, hey, we're not going to touch that story because it's too controversial about like anything to do with Israel Palestine or something, and then turn around and say, well, actually, no, the Saudis, that's where we're going to draw the line. You know, we don't want to offend the Saudis, dude.
That might take us the rest of the night.
I think that's a question to Sundance. That's a question to Sundance, not to the people who asked for it to be shut down, but for Sundance. There's one that has it, but I'm not going to tell you who yet. So.
Okay, the other questions, let's have your hand. Please, read us up here, and then there was one. Who else? Yes, okay, you're next.
Hi, thanks all for coming. The murder of Jamal Khashoggi, what will the legacy be for journalists over the world? For everyone today, not just for everyone.
What will the legacy be?
We can add Shireen possibly to that.
We got a long list. Well, Jason.
Yeah. So I was. I can't say that I knew Jamal very well. We were just getting to know each other. We were both in the same section of the Post, in the bid section. Most of our writers are scattered around the world. There was one of two that was based in the newsroom. Jamal lived in D.C. and we had some interactions, and I was asked to write the first piece that he was missing. And for me, sitting in the Washington Post newsroom, having been a correspondent who was jailed on the other side of the world, working for that same newspaper, it was pretty surreal to watch how my colleagues and employers, the PR team, lawyers, publisher, editors sprung into action. And I think it was pretty incredible that, the abduction and ultimately murder of Jamal was a top headline for as long as it was. All the more damning that there hasn't been any sort of justice. That's heartbreaking to me and should be anybody that cares about press freedom, cares about democracy and just justice for all.
Yeah, I think the legacy of it's unfortunately accountability. There's no accountability for the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. There's no accountability for the killing of Shirin Abu Akleh. There's no accountability for dozens of journalists that have been killed in Mexico, in the Philippines, in India. In fact, there was a Pakistani journalist that was just killed in Kenya, an investigative reporter that was just killed in Kenya. There is no accountability, sadly, and that has to change. And it's not a good look for the United States and the President of the United States to go to Saudi Arabia, as we saw this summer, when there still is no meaningful, real accountability for that. I know the Saudis will say that there has been, that they're done with this and it's, they've conducted their investigation, but I think the U.S. should demand more. I think the U.S. should demand more for what has happened to Shirin Abu Akleh. And we're sadly still very far away from seeing any accountability on that front as well.
And that there doesn't seem to have been much of an outcry domestically about this. Like, it was sort of short-lived, right? Like, and then it went back to normal and to the fist bump with MBS and to trying to get oil, etc. So it's like the lip service human rights only lasts so long. That's sad.
Okay. Yes, I think we have 7 minutes left, so I might be able to put in 2 or 3 questions.
Yeah.
We've had a really interesting discussion today about diversity in media, and so I wanted to ask a question for those that are starting a career in journalism or considering pivoting to journalism, if you have any advice for navigating what is ultimately a difficult field, tackling difficult subjects, and how we can empower the next generation of journalists to do what we're trying to do.
I'll ask you, Karen, take it first.
Sure. I'm also on the board of AMEJA, and we are establishing a mentoring program. So please let us know if you'd like to be involved. Perhaps maybe we can help give advice on an ongoing basis. I think it's really hard to give blanket advice besides like trying to do a good job, But to have something that you can go back to over and over again, I think would be really helpful and to help build a network to support you as you advance through your career.
Definitely agree with that. I think mentorship is important. I think you'll be surprised as to how much journalists like to help other journalists out. I know that I'm in my place in my career because along the way other journalists opened doors for me and gave me opportunities, whether I was an intern all the way through various stages as a producer and as a correspondent. So again, not just to say go out there and do the work, but look for opportunities, think outside the box. The landscape of media is changing. Consider broadcast news. But yeah, no, I would say there are definitely opportunities out there, and they're hard to find and definitely competitive. But I think, certainly in a room like this, you guys have tremendous potential and skill sets that I think are much needed and still very much needed.
I want to see, okay, yes, and then, microphone.
Go ahead. Just use the microphone.
You a question, no opinion here. How much do you think you will lose if you don't know the language of your subject?
How much do you lose if you
I'm not asking that doesn't make you a better journalist or not, but because the language question is always talking about the unique aspect. We all have different levels of proficiencies and one should use it. Without question, it doesn't mean anything.
Yes, I think it's incredibly, if you're going to cover a country, you should, for a period of time, you should be able to speak the language. If you're going to parachute in, which is what happens a lot of times, hopefully you have a staff of people that you can trust that you work with that speak the language. If you're reporting on a place and nobody that is involved in that reporting speaks the language, maybe better to stay.
Yeah, I think for sure, you lose a lot, of course, if you don't speak the language. There's no question.
Who would you rather have cover Iran? Me, who doesn't speak Farsi, or Jason, who speaks Farsi? That's why I said earlier on, it's not about just the language. I mean, I know people who are not from the Middle East and who are not Persian, but have invested the time to learn the language and the culture and the nuance of the history, and can offer just as much insight as somebody who does speak the language, but may not know as much. So I think it's not about. I mean, they're not just simple like check boxes you check. It's like, are you investing in learning about the stories that you are covering, and are you spending the time to get to know people? Do you have, if you don't speak the language, do you have adequate resources in place to kind of bring in all of the stuff that you want to understand about the story and not just fly over and parachute in and out?
Shout out to one of the Washington Post columns, a young woman named Miriam Berger, who has been reporting on Iran and speaks Persian, learned studied Persian in college, and the Post has encouraged her to continue to advance her skills in language. She's doing some incredible reporting on Iran from Washington, D.C. because she has that proficiency.
You're all sitting in a center where on the third floor we teach most of the region's major languages. And I know Zraick, you probably asked this question because you yourself taught Arabic, not with us, but Georgetown elsewhere, so you have a very good sense of how long it takes, but it's a years-long commitment faced with any of these languages. And also just years-long commitment, but you don't have to be a heritage speaker to take up that commitment. Others, and we have colleagues who have, and Jason Miriam, and there are others who make the commitment to both language acquisition and to the regional specialization. Okay, we have one more question. Anne.
Zahra took my first question. So I wanted to ask about innovations. It's not with me. Would you prefer this? I wanted to go back to the question about access and technology and working with teams and all the different tools that we have at our disposal to cover stories that are hard to get at. And I'm thinking about how far we've come from the beginning of covering hard to access places in Syria, and remember we used to take one video per day and do like a frame by frame analysis of the video and get it to the person who shot it, and that was just, and it exploded into like whole systems evolved to vet videos, and later the whole field of visual investigations, where my colleagues have been really pulled into that. And so I'm curious about two things there, because one really important element of that is personal networks on the ground from people that were in the region and are now overseas, or people that are there and someone who knows someone, but also citizen journalists who kind of created themselves. I'm thinking of Syria as a model, but it's also the case in Ukraine and Iran and all kinds of places. So first of all, is there a big difference in the challenges related to doing that responsibly in Iran right now? Because I'm just not so familiar with that in this current uprising. And secondly, what have people in the region contributed to journalism as a whole? With the innovations that they have made from the ground up. I'm talking about Syrians and other people who amid a fog of disinformation, there have emerged amazing journalists who found new ways to find things out and get information out. And I think it's been adopted in other countries.
So, I mean, I think on the current protests in Iran, it's really complicated, right? I mean, there's been a constant stream of images and videos over the last 7 weeks. It's almost impossible to know what's for today and what's for Tuesday, right? You mentioned this visual investigation, or what's called the visual forensics. We did a great one, they did a great one, week before last about prison fire in the week. And they had all of these videos, and I can tell you, they got in touch with me and said, hey Jason, can you look at this map of when the president told us what this was? I said, I was kept in one specific place, and I don't know. But let me call these 5 other people that I know who spent time there, and we got on Zoom calls, I got some newsroom, and it's a laborious and long process with a lot of different eyes. Probably at least half a dozen journalists working on this, and it's wonderful that the Times and others are winning major prizes for this kind of endeavor. And I don't think the public understands yet how much of a lift it is for our news organizations to keep this kind of work. And we talk about news being the first rough draft of history. We're perfecting it. We're getting better at it. But it takes time and energy and resources. And then at the same time, we'll be sifting through a lot of stuff that isn't actually actual, complicates it even more.
Yeah, I'll maybe just add to that just points to how valuable these skills are. Which remain pretty sexualized, like the sort of bell and tap style, like video verification, all that. So going back to the sort of career advice question from before, I mean, having those skills is such a huge asset because they're only going to become more important, because of how technology has evolved and the camera in everyone's hand.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, we have a department that does that as well, and it's an incredibly important tool because they do that work diligently, and it goes through our standards department, and just spending the time to verify the video and look at it from different angles, and try to find other markers, and try to find geolocators. We ask for the original source material sometimes, so we can kind of assess it for itself. I mean, there's so many layers to it, and the producers that work on it are incredibly talented journalists with strong language skills, strong investigative skills, strong technical skills. Truly remarkable what they can do with that.
So I just wanted to add something to your question. I work with the Arab Reporters for Investigative Journalism, and we have reporters literally everywhere. We're nonprofit. We're happy to connect youth organizations who are working on stories with reporters anywhere, like northern Syria, regime-controlled areas, southern Yemen, northern Yemen. But I also wanted to tell you about this new initiative. A reporter who I've been working with, she is Syrian and she lives in Istanbul, started, I think she won like the Google News Initiative or something, where she's using VR to help correspondents or reporters who cannot go to certain places, use the VR to kind of prepare themselves. And she had me tested. So I put on like, the VR, like, goggles, and then I went to a refugee camp in northern Syria. She has to have someone physically there to like kind of guide the camera, but I was able to see like, I saw something, I'm like, turn left, let me see over here, and then there was someone, I'm like, let's interview him, and then we interviewed him.
I got it.
We're slightly late, but not too bad. Okay, save your questions for the reception after, because we do have to do the awards now. It's 7:05, and will come up, and we have to move, but we're going to come back on.
Yeah? Well, thank you. Thank you to our panelists for this interesting and honest conversation. I think a lot of the things that you talked about connect closely to why there is AMEJA and why AMEJA is important to have. So before I start talking about the organization and before we start our awards ceremony, I just want to say like a side note that we do recognize the problems with using terms like the Middle East, the Arab world, MENA, to describe our part of the world, and there are constant discussions about this amongst us in AMEJA. AMEJA started in 2005 by a small group of people, some of whom are still on the board today, myself included, Mohamad, who is sitting right here, and some others who couldn't be here tonight. At the time, we were starting early careers. We have stories similar maybe to Ayman's, but I spent most of my, I started my career in Cairo, but moved here and also covered a lot of 9/11 stuff, did a lot of translations and all of that. And we came together, we kind of found some commonalities, some frustrations we were having, but at the same time also realizing that just being in the newsroom made such a big difference and why it's important for us to kind of start this organization, start working on this. Since then, AMEJA has grown a lot, but the most growth we've seen was in the last 2 years. We have 252 members right now, and I'll speak about some of the things that happened in the last 2 years which make us very proud. I also want to talk about our mission. Our mission is for us to improve the coverage of the MENA region, also to create space for journalists who are of Arab and Middle Eastern descent to talk to each other, to support them advance their career, and all of that. Most of our focus is on journalists of Arab and Middle Eastern descent who work in North America, but our membership is open to anyone, and we have members all over the world, and we also have different kinds of memberships. Even if you're not strictly a journalist, you're still welcome to become a member of me. Some of the things that happened in the last 2 years. We recognized as an organization that for us to grow and for this growth to be sustainable, we had to move to a fee-based membership structure. Our fees are $30 a year for membership, so it's not a lot, but it was a way for us to start this growth and to sustain it over time. We also launched a new website. We update it regularly, but most importantly, it's a functional website where members, there's a member section where they can go in, check out some jobs and opportunities, and at the same time find a directory of other members and connect this way. If there is a question, and we do get like lots of members who come and would like to connect with someone who works in TV, want some career advice, or are simply looking for a source to interview someone, and this has proven very helpful. We also launched a weekly jobs and opportunities newsletter. I'm amazed by how many jobs, I always say that it's so difficult to find a job in journalism, but we have so many, thanks to Marco sitting over there, who sends the newsletter every Friday to our members. We also launched a podcast. I don't know if Najib and Noor are you here in the room. Reorient is the name of the podcast. The first one was a conversation with Rezaian. It's really incredible. I personally got goosebumps listening to it because from 2005 to have a podcast that it sounds like it's so professionally done. Thank you so much to Najib and Noor and also to board members Karen and Joseph who supported this project. And we started volunteer committees thanks to board member Yasmin Hamidi. We realized that some board members are passionate about some things more than others, and we also have members who are passionate about things. So we asked everyone, what would you like to work on and create these 5 committees? We have a mentorship committee, we have a digital committee who works on how to effectively use our social media to serve the goals of the organization, also highlight 4 or 5 members and many other ideas that they're going to be working on in the coming period. We have an events committee. Most of the time the events committee has been spent organizing this event, but we also did have an event in DC that was organized by Jenny Kajesi, who leads our DC chapter, and was to honor Shireen Awakla, and of course the killing of Shireen shook us all, and it was an event to honor her. We have a resource committee. AMEJA has issued 2 resource guides, or what we call resource guides. One is on how to cover Palestine and Israel, and the other one was done with the AMEJA. It was on how to cover 9/11. We felt that we got really good and positive feedback when we issued these guides, and we get questions about whether or not we have more. So I'm part of this committee, and we're discussing things like a quote-unquote expert list, or just a list of sources that will be researched, vetted by AMEJA, regularly updated, who have experience in different fields, and that you can go to find people to interview for your story. We also did a lot of fundraising, thanks to Yasmin Hamidi, and we've raised, leading up to this event, $10,000, and hoping that this will give a kickstart to the very successful end-of-year fundraising campaign. We also collaborated with other organizations. We issued that guide with the Asian American Journalists Association. We met with the Marie Colvin Journalists Association because they have a strong mentorship program. They support female Arab journalists through this mentorship program, which I am a part of. And we met with the director, and she gave us lots of advice that we're hoping to use to launch our own mentorship program this year. We also signed a memorandum of understanding with the Low Impact Fund. They support freelancers, and we're hoping that they will be a source of support to our freelance members of AMEJA. And we also met with the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion departments of a couple of news organizations. We're hoping to do more of that next year. What's really incredible about all of this that we've done and we're so proud of, is that it was done on an all-volunteer basis. We have no paid staff. This all-volunteer board. We were working nights and weekends, and even this event, we did it all ourselves. So we can only imagine what we can do if we had more resources. And we have already set some goals that we're hoping we can work on for the next year. We'd love to solidify what we started this year. We'd like to hold more events, in-person and virtual workshops for our members. We'd also like to launch our mentorship program, issue some of those resource guides that I mentioned, explore ways that we can work with other organizations and associations, connect with the TDI departments, and our biggest goal is to have a convention, some sort of a conference where in 2023 this award ceremony will be part of something bigger that includes speakers and other events and discussions similar to the one that we had today. I know you'd like to get to the announcements, but before I go, I have to do a round of thank yous. I'd like to start with the NYU Kevorkian Center and with Professor Mohamad Bazzi. We really could not have done this without you. I also would like thank you to Fidel. Fidel, we love working with you, and we hope you work all the way. And to the student volunteers, Tess, Mandy, and Hajra, thank you so much for being here. We would also like to thank our jury members, Leila, Ayman, Jason, Kareem, and Mohamad. And to mention that Kareem was one of the founding board members, and that Mohamad Bazzi was also a board member at some point, right? I think a lot of people don't realize the amount of time that a jury spends. They have to read and watch and listen to so many reports in order for them to select the winners and the finalists. So I understand how busy you all are, and we really appreciate your time, and we hope that it was an enjoyable process for you too. And last but not least, I kept this in the end. I have to thank everyone on the board and the AMEJA members who have helped make tonight possible. And I'm going to start with Natasha Onem, who is not here tonight. It's middle of the night where Natasha is. I don't know if she's watching, I doubt it. But I have to tell you about Natasha. She joined the board, and I think during the first meeting she said, I'm going to take on moving us to a fee-based membership structure. It was a very complex process. She did it, it took months and emails, and it was really a lot. And as soon as it was done, I think it was like the next day, she announced in our chat group, I'm going to do awards now. And she surely did the awards. I don't know what to say, Natasha. All the dedication, all the time you put into this, thank you so, so much. Raja Al-Idrisi, who is here tonight. Raja, can you wave? Raja is like the master of this event. We don't know where to start, so I'm just going to say thank you. We recognize all the work that you've put into this over the last few months, and I hope you get a well-deserved rest this weekend. And we'd like to thank Lina Mohammed. Lina is watching, I think. Lina was in charge of doing all the work for the press releases, all the drafts for our social media, and she worked on the book, which she put in many, many hours. We miss Lina, and we wish you were here tonight. Yasmin Hamidi, our board member, and she led our fundraising campaign, and again, it was so successful, and we're hoping that it's just the beginning. Many of us on the board are journalists who know nothing about fundraising, so Yasmin walked us through all of this and helped us get to where we are today. Margot Morgan, our board member, and she's like the director of our everything digital. Whenever we have a digital challenge, Margot was also sitting over there. She's live tweeting and like producing the live stream somehow at the same time tonight. Thank you so much, Margot, for all the work you put into this. And Mona Eskanda for constantly updating our website with the latest about the awards, coming in last minute to do proofreading and some editing, and she's also our photographer tonight. Thank you, Mona. And also our AMEJA member volunteers, Layla Hassan, Yasmin Salam, Laura Chamu, who's helping us with the live stream here today, and Azadeen Mustafa, who helped us all the way from Ramallah. Azadeen, I don't know if you were, I hope you are, thank you so, so much. Thank you all so much. It's lovely to look at this room. Thank you for listening to all of my AMEJA talk, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of the evening. We're going to start with the award ceremony now, and we're going to have our reception afterwards. Thank you. If the jury members can come.
Sick of me talking, I'm sure, but this is the last bit. Thank you for asking us. We enjoyed it a lot, and we did. We hope we see more entries next time, if you ask us that. But we want to present, I think the first is the MENA category. So yes, these were the finalists. I do want to note, those of you with eagle-eyed who realize that two of the judges were from Washington Post, but they both recused themselves on any entries having to do with the post and the judging. We managed to do that. So if anyone has questions, come to me about that. But saving the sounds of an ancient city, these were the 4 finalists in the best coverage of Middle East and North Africa, which is the Washington Post team project. Exodus by Rezaian magazine. How Shireen Abu Akleh was killed, also Washington Post, the team project, and Buying Lies, Unsafe Chemicals and Baby Bottles in Egypt, which is a project for the Arab and reporters for investigative journalism. And Ayman is going to announce the winner of this category.
First of all, really quickly, I am proud to say I'm a part of AMEJA. I think it's an excellent organization, so I encourage everyone to support it as much as possible. The jury decided that the MENA category winner for this year is How Shireen Abu Akleh Was Killed by if I can just read our jury citation for this incredible piece of journalism. At a time of heightened international pressure, obfuscating narratives, and restrictive accessibility, this investigation managed to reveal new information on and advance the public's understanding of the tragic killing of one of the Middle East's most respected and recognized journalists, Shireen Abu Akleh. Despite the challenges and sensitivities around reporting on Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories, this multi-layered, nuanced, and meticulously reported piece of journalism documented, based on numerous interviews, analysis of visual and audio evidence, and expert forensic testimony, that an Israeli soldier has shot and killed Abu Akleh. This is intrepid reporting that had a global impact, and the AMEJA Award jury is pleased to recognize the work of this Washington Post team, which represents one of journalism's most important missions, which is speaking truth to power. And I'd just like to really quickly recognize the journalists that were involved, the reporters Meg Kelly, Sarah Kellen, Steve Hendricks, the editors, Kareem Fahim, Rima Ad, Elise Samuels. The graphics editing team included Atara Mirza, copy editing Jamie Zega, and design and editing and development by June Alcantara and Irfan Rezaian, Osama Hassan in Jenin, Shira Rubin in Tel Aviv, Alan Francis in London, Sarah Dadouche and Nader Dolam in Beirut, and Sufyan Baha in the West Bank all contributed to this report. And we're very pleased to announce that Elise Samuels and Meg Kelly are here tonight to receive this award. Oh, yes, sorry, please, yes, please come on up. Sorry, I should have made that clear. Come on down.
Okay, the second category which we judged, there's a third category which I will tell you about, which we did not judge, which is up to the membership. But the second category was the best coverage of Arab and Middle Eastern heritage communities in North America. And the three finalists that there were WPMM TV, CBS Chicago, a project on Arab American deaths, miscounting, undercounting of Arab American deaths through COVID, part of the country with MENA, lack of a MENA category. The shooter's wife, Salman, wife of the Pulse nightclub gunman, is ready to speak by Rana Matul of Vice News. And what does she look like represents Rezaian Ali, doing writing for the New York Times magazine. Samah Assad, Dorothy Tucker, and Chris Hacker were the three journalists for the project on COVID. And Jason's going to carry some of their.
Before I do, I just want to thank you all for being here tonight. And it was a wonderful evening. Glad to be with you. I'm going to read the jury citation. The winner is The Shooter's Wife by Rana Matul. Persistent, insightful reporting over a 2-year period which convinced the story's main subject, Nur Salman, to agree to a series of interviews in which she revealed details of domestic abuse that preceded the Pulse nightclub shooting in 2016. The tour managed to do ambitious and careful reporting on a well-trodden story with competing narratives. This work exemplifies the spirit of this new AMEJA Awards, honoring some of the finest work in journalism by and about Middle East and North African communities. Unfortunately, Rana could not be here with us tonight, but she's recorded a short video.
Nur Salman for trusting me with her story, and many people I spoke to on and off the record as I pieced it together. A special shout out because as editor, Leah Kinder invites me for being a great platform to share it. I wish I could be there with you guys tonight. Have a wonderful evening, and I'll catch you next time. Thank you, AMEJA, for this award. It is really an honor.
So our third award is a special award for us. It's the Walid al-Gabri Memorial Award. Walid was one of the founding board members. Actually, I can't call him one of the founding board members. He was the founding board member. It was really Walid's idea, and he discussed with Jamal. This is how it all started. And we're going to hear from Jamal, who couldn't be here tonight, but he recorded a video about Walid that we're going to play for you. Walid passed away in 2018. We're honored to have his wife and son with us here tonight to present this award. I'm going to play Jamal's video first. Jamal is the vice president and also founding board member of AMEJA.
My name is Mohamad Bazzi. I'm a Center for Community Organization from its very beginnings. I'm absolutely delighted with AMEJA's recent students that it's at right now. I'm not for community tonight, but alas, I myself, looking at community freedom, tonight, in addition to recognizing excellent journalism practiced by so many of our colleagues, it's fitting, essential in fact, to honor the person who prompted the foundation of AMEJA some 17 years ago, Walid al-Gabri. Walid had arrived in New York from London just a year before, transferred to financial clients to be a senior manager. Once here, he was told about the U.S. media landscape, particularly the media advocacy is one way to go. But Walid thought, rightly, as many of us would agree, that the way to move forward is to blow back behind, however we find that, the positions of influence in the media. It's employers, it's editors, presenters. At the time, there were a few of us, but we were largely scattered in different media organizations, and often we were the only ones as individuals of many background within Black communities. To move forward what Ian said quite rightly, we have to stick together. That's essentially what he told me when we first met in New York at a banquet in the American American Professionals in inaugural. So we stayed together, a group of us in the start, the best of people from different media, some print, some broadcast, some newsletter, and we passed what we wanted, what was possible, and ways of how to get there. We're ambitious, perhaps not even so, but we did manage to host several events the first 2 years, mixers, lectures, panel sessions, and podcasts. We came up with experts on a list of experts on various topics that we thought through with more colleagues in the media. And we created a technological model, a user listserv, in which members can communicate from one another, job opportunities, make announcements, and just be part of the community. This was a quick effort, to be sure, mostly by our original board members who met monthly, not unseemingly in person, to discuss the plan of the activities of the work. Unless we recognize her, but we would provide the necessary nervous energy, hence it really was and self-deprecating, quick to laugh, and always impatient about AMEJA being, quote unquote, taken over or overshadowed by the competition with the IP. And therefore, we should imperatives to get things moving. It was key to build networks. Saja, especially Susan Hudson, were early collaborators. And recognizing common cause, we worked seamlessly with the Iranian Journalists Association in the first couple of months. The organization's dynamism faded after the first 3 years, and when they thought about the inevitable reality of an organization founded by younger people who were moving up in their careers and solidified families. Yet we continued to meet, albeit less frequently, coming up with ways to help build the organization the best we could and to keep things going. Not one to the cliche of our president for life. While he stepped down as president, we did remain on the board, always contributing and always pushing us forward. In 2016, William was diagnosed with illness that he barely fought for over 2 years before leaving us. I recall that a month or so before his passing, Willie asked when our next board was going to be. The same spirit that compelled Willie to start AMEJA in 2005, was reignited after his death, and the board decided that real effort would create a larger organization. Willie was one reason, of course, but the importance of our mission, mutual support, increasing our community's presence in media, articulating stories that we find important, and vital to our multicultural societies, is far more important than national nationality, as well as all others who struggle to have a voice. It's entirely fitting then that the award be given to an original member selected by other media members who made it well his own. And it's with great pleasure that Malik, his wife, Nina Kassi-Debri, and Malik's son, Nawal, are here to present this important and for us very personal work. Malik is a genuine friend for many of us. For me, he was almost like a brother, with all that entails. The camaraderie and intimate friendship, the frivolity and frustration, the certainty that if either of us was in need, the other would be at his best to provide. I'm glad we're going to be tonight, celebrating accomplishments of our members and peers, and most of all, I'm glad we've been together, share the energy that Malik brought forth. Thank you all, and thank you, Malik.
I would like to invite Dibe and Marwan to come and present the Editorial Gallery Memorial Award. the finalists for this award. So the finalists.
Can everyone hear me? The finalists are The Problem is Men, Muslim Women Speak Out Against Abuse in the U.S. by Zraick, Middle East Eye. The Forgotten Arabs of Iran, Arab News Staff, Arab News. Salvini Elnas, Dani Hajar, freelance, and Journey to Guantanamo, a week in America's notorious penal colony by Mustafa Bayoumi from The Nation.
The award goes to Dani Hajar, Salvini Elnas.
Mom. Thank you, Dad, and my sister. Thanks to my wife back there, because without her and all my insecurities about this newsletter, none of this would have happened. So I got to thank Jen and Jazzy in the back, because she nominated me for this, and I blame her. And I got to thank all the incredible music that's coming out of the region, both locally and in the diaspora. I got to thank every single guest feature that willingly shared their go-to songs with me and shared very vulnerable stories about their connections with that music. I think that's really powerful. Our communities go through a lot of heavy things, very heavy things. And so what I wanted to try to do with this newsletter was say, hey, we can do fun things too, and we can have a break, and that's cool. We can do that through music. Music is a great connector of our community. So this is really for our community and for everybody just who wants a break.
Thank you for your patience with us with all of this. I finally just want to thank our donors before we head to the reception. Thank you to NBC News, Arab News, NPR, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Political, Access, and Grassroots International. I assure you that the financial support that you gave us, we will use it to do all of those things that I spoke about before and more. And if we grow the growth that we want to witness is in no small parts thanks to your support. Please, I know that the invitation set is going to end at 7:30, but we have a lot of food thanks to NYU, lots of drinks, and we hope that you can, if you have nothing else to do, that you stick around and stay for the reception. Thank you so much.